All rise. Veuillez-vous lever. Please be seated.
Before you continue, Mr. Groom, I'd like to invite, perhaps at a later moment, Ms. Bremeyer to explain to us in still number 61 what the billions of dinars are approximately in real money. Because I couldn't gain any impression on how much money was really spent. And since I think the economy at that time was mainly done in Deutschmarks, perhaps if a translation into understandable currency could be made, it would be appreciated. Mr. Groom, please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Just on that point, as it seems Your Honor is already aware, there was a period of significant hyperinflation where witnesses talk about the price of a quart of milk going up between the time they walked into a store and the time they went to pay for it. But we will make every effort to try to give an estimate of what it was in Deutschmarks. Your Honor, if I might return now to Zvornik. One of the reasons that Zvornik was one of the municipalities selected by the prosecution is that it clearly demonstrates the intent that the members of the core group of perpetrators shared. The excesses perpetrated against the Muslim population of Zvornik had spiraled into a level of chaos in which no one, not even Serbs, were safe from the criminals turned loose with impunity in the municipality of Zvornik, as we can see in this report on slide number 95. In a report drafted by Colonel Tolomir about events all over Bosnia on the 28th of July, 92, he raised the question with his superiors of the men who had perpetrated such grievous crimes in Zvornik with his superiors. Here in slide number 96, he identifies by name Arkan's men, Captain Dragon's men, and Sechel's men. He describes these three groups as being composed of many criminals, even pathological criminals. He states that these formations, quote, display hatred of non-Serbian peoples, and one can conclude without reservations that they are the genocidal element among the Serbian people, end quote. He goes on to say, quote, war, profiteering, and looting are the motive for a great majority of paramilitaries, close quote. Here on slide 97, Tolomir enumerates the 30 to 40 million German marks worth of booty stolen from the area of Srebrenica and Skelani. In the end of July 1992, there was a crackdown against paramilitary forces in Zvornik. In fact, the Serbian DB would itself be involved in the investigation of these paramilitary units. Two paramilitary leaders, the Vukovic brothers, leaders of the Yellow Wasps, would ultimately be investigated and arrested by the Serbian MUP. Your Honors, the two accused contributed to the goals of the JCE in the ways outlined in the box on the right-hand side of slide 98, and by so doing made themselves individually criminally liable for the crimes committed in Zvornik. all elements of the JCE, except those from the Republic of Serb Krajina on the far left of the diagram, had some involvement in the takeover and ethnic cleansing of Bijeljina and Zvornik. Bosanski Shamac, shown here on slide 99, located along the Sava River in northeastern Bosnia, had the misfortune of lying in the lands targeted to create the land bridge between land targeted by Serbs in the east of Bosnia and the land targeted by Serbs in the Krajina region. A successful conquest and ethnic cleansing of Bosanski Shamac would achieve the first and second goals, namely separation of the ethnic communities and establishment of a corridor, the Posavina corridor, as it came to be popularly known. In early 1992, the Serb crisis staff of the Bosanski Shamac municipality sent 20 local men to be trained in the Red Beret training camp in Ilok. These men were just completing their training at the Red Beret camp when the takeovers of Bijeljina and Zvornik were underway. They were airlifted back to Bosanski Shamac on JNA helicopters with 30 members of Sechel's men. Before leaving, they were personally briefed by Mr. Simatović. The day after Arkan announced he had finished his task in Zvornik, the attack on Bosanski Shamac commenced. Among these 50 men who went to Bosanski Shamac, there were others who were trained by the Serbian DB who would work with them in the takeover of the town. Slobodan Miljojković, also known as Lugar, was present, as were Dragan Đorđević, also known as Cerny, and Sreko Radovanović, also known as Debeli, and a group of men from Serbia. As this report on slide 100 indicates, Cerny, one of the leaders of the crimes perpetrated in Shamac, was in fact arrested. And what happened after his arrest demonstrates the role that both Simatović and Stanišić played in the takeover of Shamac. Another report, shown here on slide 101, summarizes the types of crimes that Cerny and his men were believed to have perpetrated. They include specific allegations, including murder and the looting of expensive cars. A local Serb leader, recognizing the loss of Cerny to their efforts to ethnically cleanse Shamac, went to the Serbian MUP building in search of Franko Simatović. It was his intention to ask Mr. Simatović if there was anything he could do to secure Cerny's release from the military police. He was unable to find Mr. Simatović, but as he walked in the parking lot, he by chance saw Jovica Stanišić, who he approached and explained the problem to. Mr. Stanišić told him that he would see to the matter by sending a telex to the military. Shortly thereafter, Cerny was released to continue his crimes. The answer to how Cerny, a man whose excesses resulted in his arrest by the Bosnian Serb army he was fighting alongside of, could promptly be released is perhaps best captured in a report issued by the local military authorities. In this document on slide 102, the author makes the observation that the crimes now being committed in the name of Serbs are comparable to the crimes committed against the Serbs in the Second World War. The basic facts of Cerny's release were set out in this Bosnian police report on slide number 103. The prosecution charges that the two accused contributed to the achievement of the JCE's goals in the ways listed in the box on the right of slide number 104. By doing so, they made themselves individually criminally liable for the crimes committed in Bosanski Shamac. As in Bijeljina and Zvornik, all elements of the JCE, except those in the Republic of Srpska Krajina, were involved. Before the war, the population of Bosanski Shamac had been 29.8% Croat and 8.7% Muslim. After the war, those figures were 1.9% Croatian and 1.3% Muslim. Like Shamac and Brčko, these municipalities not only had large non-Serb populations that needed to be removed, but they also lay in the corridor or land bridge that was to be created between the targeted lands in west of Bosnia and the targeted lands in the east. Over 15,000 Muslims would flee Doboj during the takeover. When the war began, Doboj municipality was 30% Muslim, 11.5% Croat, and 50% Serb. By the war's end, it was 0.6% Muslim, 1.5% Croat, 92.5% Serb. Before the takeover of Doboj, men from a long list of DB paramilitaries began converging on Doboj, including Martić's men from the Krajina. While Arkan commanded his own men, and Sešel's men had their own commanders, the remaining men were referred to as Red Berets and were commanded by Rajo Božović, a colonel in the special units of the Serbian DB. The takeover of Doboj ended on the 3rd of May, 1992. This overwhelming force, many trained and outfitted by Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović, were able to quickly and decisively seize control of a municipality with a population of 102,549 people, covering an area of 684 square kilometers. When the town was firmly in Serb control, the campaign of persecutions against Doboj's Muslims began, mirroring what by this time had become the well-known signature of these units: beatings, arbitrary arrests, interrogations, and murder. Non-Serb homes were aggressively searched and damaged, making it clear that non-Serb families who had lived in Doboj for generations had now better leave. Non-Serb civilians from Doboj were taken into custody and housed in various makeshift detention facilities in and around Doboj. For example, nearly 200 people were imprisoned in a disco. In these facilities, the detainees were beaten, and some prisoners were taken out and summarily executed. Muslim prisoners were forced to eat pork in violation of their religious beliefs. In acts of almost unspeakable vulgarity, prisoners were compelled to perform sexual acts upon each other. On the 12th of July, 1992, about 50 detainees were taken from the disco and used as human shields. These detainees were placed in front of the Serbian front lines and made to walk toward the front lines of the army of Bosnia and Herzegovina. When the detainees hesitated, a Serb shot one detainee in the head to encourage the others. When the Bosnian soldiers began beckoning the detainees, calling them to run towards the Bosnian front lines, the detainees broke into a run. The Serbs then opened fire, killing 27 of these human shields. So decisive and absolute was the Red Berets' campaign in Doboj that those in the neighboring municipality of Teslić would look to it as an example, as indicated in this report shown on slide number 106. The report mentions by name Bozovic, the same Bozovic whom Milosevic recognizes on the Kula tape. These are but 4 of the many municipal areas that were taken over by Bosnian Serbs in the spring and summer of 1992. Takeovers that were marked by the precision of their execution and the brutality of their success. The prosecution charges that the 2 accused contributed to the achievement of the JCE goals in the ways set out in the box on the right of slide 107, and by doing so incurred personal criminal liability for the crimes committed in Doboj. Here, different from the previous municipalities, it is also the prosecution's case that the direct involvement of Martić's men also implicates the individual criminal responsibility of the accused. The overall criminal plan was a success, and many municipalities were placed under Serb control in the spring of 1992. To place the crimes committed in these 4 municipalities in the context of the overall plan of the joint criminal enterprise, it is helpful to look at a series of maps on slides 108 to 115 that show in chronological order the takeover of territory, as well as the role the 2 accused took in this process. It is the prosecution's case that the rapid, comprehensive, and organized assertion of Serb control over territory in Bosnia-Herzegovina is evidence of the existence of and the effectiveness of the joint criminal enterprise. The takeover process begins when Arkan enters Bijeljina on the night between the 31st of March and the 1st of April. In that first week, over a dozen municipalities would be taken over and placed under Serb control. While some of those municipalities, such as Tito Drvar, were predominantly Serb, and asserting control was primarily done by switching allegiance from Sarajevo to Pale. In other municipalities, such as Bijeljina, these municipalities were taken by armed force and the commission of serious crimes against the civilian population. During the second week, the focus of the takeovers would remain on the Drina Valley, and Serb takeovers swept over eastern Bosnia in places like Visegrad, Foča, and Čekovići.
Thank you for slowing down.
As you have already heard, Mr. Stanišić and Simatović played a direct role in the takeover of Zvornik and the expulsion of its large Muslim population. In central Bosnia, the municipality of Stanišić fell during the second week of April. Here in slide 111, we see that in the third week of the takeover, after Arkan would advise that his work was completed in Zvornik, the special units of the Serbian DB would turn their attention to the municipality of Bosanski Shamac. The takeovers continue along the Drina River with Bratanac, and in Foča's neighbor to the west, Kalinovic, Vagošća, part of the greater Sarajevo area, would also fall under Serb control this week. Up in the northwestern part of Bosnia, in the Bosnian Krajina, Serb control would be forcibly imposed with its by now characteristic crimes in Bosanski Novi and Sanski Most. Serb games would continue in the Bosnian Krajina into the last days of April, when Prijedor, where some of the most grievous crimes of the takeovers were committed. Serb control was asserted over Mokanić Grad and large parts of Bosanska Krupa, bringing the border of Serb-controlled lands to the banks of the Una River. The campaign in the Drina Valley would continue with the takeover of Lasnica and the encirclement of Sarajevo in preparation of its siege. By the end of April, in this 30-day period, 35 municipalities would be taken over, an average of over one municipality per day. While the pace of the takeovers would slow a bit during the following months, the pace of the crimes only accelerated. The accused would send Colonel Božović, along with other members of the special units, to spearhead the takeover of Doboj, a critical municipality in the Posavina corridor. The encirclement around the Sarajevo would be complete with the taking of Hadžići, Trnovo, and Ilija in Maine. With the fall of Rogatica and Rudo, the takeover of the municipalities along the eastern border of Bosnia would be complete, with the exception of Srebrenica. Also in May, 3 more municipalities in the Bosnian Krajina would also fall. The Bosnian Krajina would be completely secured by the end of June with the takeover of Prinovar and Kotovaros. During June, the primary focus of takeovers shifted to the southern areas of Bosnia, where Nevesinja, Belica, and Ljubinja would be placed under Serb control, as well as Trebinja, with the exception of its southern area of Ravno, which was controlled at the time by Croatian forces. By the end of the summer, with the takeover of Dereventa and Odjak, over 50 municipalities would be placed under Serb control to secure the functioning of the Posavina corridor. The 2 maps you now see on the screen in slide 116 are demographic maps. One from 1991 before the ethnic cleansing campaign of 1992, and one from 1997 after the campaign. You may observe by the success of the joint criminal enterprise as measured statistically in dramatic demographic changes. If you look along the Posavina corridor, that is the horizontal oval at the top of the map, the target of the second strategic goal, you will see a dramatic shift in the population as marked by the change of color to red. The vertical oval on the right-hand side of the map is the Drina Valley. And again, you can see the dramatic shift in color represents the restructuring of the demographic landscape from mixed or Muslim majority municipalities into red, Serb municipalities. These takeovers and subsequent crimes resulted in population shift hundreds of thousands of people, nearly 400,000 people forcibly removed from their homes. The map on slide 117 shows what happened after the summer of 1992. Some additional takeovers would continue. The light blue municipalities show where there will be evidence of involvement of the special units of the Serbian DB, and the dark blue municipalities indicate those locations in which the two accused are charged with the commission of crimes. The next charges in the indictment will concern the serious crimes committed toward the end of the conflict in 1995. It would be incorrect for the Chamber to conclude that Mr. Stanisić's and Mr. Simatović's involvement in Bosnia went into a hiatus throughout this period. Throughout this period, they were very much involved in joint operations designed to hold on to the targeted lands they seized in 1992 and to resist the Bosnian government's attempts to recapture this land. You will hear summary evidence of the accused's involvement in Bosnia in the time between 1992 and 95, primarily from a headquarters they established in Bajina Bašta in Serbia, just across the border with Bosnia. I would now like to turn the attention of the Chamber to the crimes charged in the indictment related to Trnovo. The facts of what occurred in Srebrenica in July 1995 have been the subject of several trials in these courtrooms. I will not repeat them here, they are well known. We all know that the slaughter of the Muslim men and boys in Srebrenica marks the single most egregious atrocity perpetrated against the Bosnian Muslim people. The two accused here in this trial are charged with the death of 3 men and 3 boys whose murder was captured on videotape. In order for you to understand the prosecution's case as to why Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović are responsible for the deaths of the 6, we must look at what is occurring in another part of the country prior to Srebrenica. I want to focus your attention on the northwest corner of Bosnia, shown here on slide 119, a place referred to as the Bihać Pocket, which in 1993 had a population of approximately 300,000 people mostly Muslims. Its local leader, a Muslim man by the name of Fikret Abdić, sought to extricate himself from the war in Bosnia by disassociating himself with the Bosnian government and entering into an uneasy alliance with Milosevic in Belgrade. So in October 1993, Abdić traded his war with Croatia and Serbia for a war with his Bosniak brothers in Sarajevo, and shortly thereafter, the Bosnian army was engaging Abdić's poorly trained and equipped men. Abdić turned to Milosevic for help, and within a short time, Milosevic responded by sending Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović to the Bihać pocket to command an operation called PAUK, or the Spider. Milosevic sent the two men who he could rely on for this task. Stanišić would in turn bring with him the men who he had come to rely on in his covert operations in the rest of Bosnia, the special units of the Serbian DB, led by Colonel Božović, Legija, Captain Dragan, and Arkan. They established their headquarters in Mount Petrova Gora in the Krajina. The diary depicted here on slide 120 is one of the commanders in the PAUK operation and shows a number of references to Mr. Simatović and one of several references to Mr. Stanišić. We can also find references to Mr. Stanišić in the recently acquired diary of Ratko Mladić from this period. On the 6th of April 1995, Mladić met with General Perisic, Jovica Stanišić, and others in Belgrade to discuss the situation in Bihać. As shown here on slide 121, Jovica Stanišić described the support given to both Fikret Abdić and Milan Martić, and more importantly said, quote, "I sent 150 men from Slavonia through PAUK," end quote. The special units of the Serbian DB were to join forces with the Serbian Krajina army, as well as Abdić's men. Two of the three tactical groups formed with these joined forces would be under the direct command of the special units of the Serbian DB. The second tactical group would be placed under Legija's command, and the third tactical group would be placed under the command of Colonel Rajo Božović. The Scorpions were part of Legija's tactical group. The Scorpions were first formed after the fall of Vukovar, following a request by the Delatovci Oil Company to Milan Milovanović, a minister of the SAO SBWS. Its commander, Slobodan Medić, also known as Bokcha. The unit's task was to protect the oil fields in Delatovci, a task at times shared with Arkan's men. The unit grew quickly to include several hundred men. The Serbian DB provided the Scorpions with significant equipment and paid the salaries of its members with cash. approximately 30% of its members have been trained in one of the Serbian DB training camps in Kula, Mount Tara, Lipovaca, and Golubic. Its members were also issued with identification papers, identifying them as Serbian DB members. Milanović was the intermediary between Medić and Simatović and Stanišić. In 1996, after the war, some members of the unit would remain in the service of the Serbian DB and join the JSO. The two men that you see in this video on slide 122 are Legia, who have already heard much about, and Slobodan Medić, the man who gave the direct order to kill the 6 captives in Trnovo. The video is long, and I will not ask the chamber to look at all the relevant parts now. But in one segment, you will hear Legia deciding what to do with captured Muslims. His decision, as you might expect, is consistent with his treatment of non-Serbs in other areas of the conflict. Mr. Simatović would mention this involvement in PAOK in his May 1997 speech in Kula, when he said, quote, "In Western Bosnia, the unit was the backbone of Fikret Abdić's army," close quote. The PAOK operation lasted until August 1995. Let me now take you back to eastern Bosnia, July of 1995. The Bosnian Serbs decided to overtake the UN-protected area of Srebrenica. By the end of July, nearly 8,000 Muslim boys and men would be summarily executed. Not all of the murders were committed in the immediate vicinity of Srebrenica. In addition to their presence in the Bihać pocket, special units of the Serbian DB were also present in central Bosnia. The story of the involvement of the Serbian DB in what happened in Srebrenica began about a month before the massacre. In late June, the Serbian MUP was active in rounding up Serb men who were believed to be avoiding their military service. Slide 123 is a document recording this. Morale of the Serb soldiers at this stage was very low. There was a high incidence of desertion. Many of these men crossed into Serbia to stay with family or to hide among the crowds in Serbia's cities. In this particular document, Tomislav Kovac, the deputy minister, reports that on June 23rd, he has handed over to the VRS in excess of 1,500 men taken into custody in Serbia and turned over to the RS MUP. Even with this operation to compel able-bodied men to go to the front lines in Bosnia, Mladić and Karadzic were still woefully in need of additional troops. In late June of 1995, a meeting was held at the MUP Serbia to decide upon a response to a request for assistance that had been made by the government of Republika Srpska. In a meeting attended by Arkan and Slobodan Medić, the decision was taken that members of the special units of the Serbian DB, under the command of a member, Vaso Mijović, a senior commander in the special units, would go to Bosnia and help fight the Bosnian army. Only a few days later, on the 30th of June, 1995, Slobodan Milosevic met with Ratko Mladic, Fikret Abdic, and Mile Mrksic in Belgrade. Also present was Milosevic's most trusted subordinate, Jovica Stanišić. Again, General Mladic made notes about this meeting. They discussed the support to be given to the Republika Srpska, and Slobodan Milosevic specifically asked Stanišić to solve the logistical problems. In response, Jovica Stanišić proposed to send more men, in addition to the ones he had already provided. 80 men from Erdut, namely Arkan's men, and 80 men from Delatovci, namely the Scorpions. Slide 124 shows an entry from Mladic's diary regarding this. I would now draw your attention to slide 125 and would like to return to a portion of the Scorpion videotape that shows their arrival on the 26th of June. After the religious ceremony I showed you at the start of this opening, a ceremony which took place in Delatovci, this large group traveled to Pale, in the Serb-controlled area just outside of Sarajevo. As you can see in the excerpt of a report at the bottom of slide 125, an RS-MUP report records their arrival and their planned deployment to the Turnovo battlefield the next day. The map on slide 126.
L'homme que l'on voit à la planche 126, la carte, correction de l'interprète, que l'on voit à la planche 126.
The map on slide 126 shows the relationship between Pale, Turnovo, Sarajevo, and Yahorina. The ski resort at Yahorina was used as the command post. During the course of the trial, you will get a sense of the size of this operation by seeing the many paramilitaries gathered in Yahorina. One of the ways we can track the presence of the special units of the Serbian DB is that they sustained significant and regular casualties in the Turnovo area. Slide number 127 shows a chart of some of the documents that the prosecution will introduce, establishing that throughout this period, special units of the Serbian DB were present. Another senior member of the special units I would like to introduce you to is Vaso Miovic. It was him that commanded the special units while they were operating in Turnovo. When Srebrenica fell on the 11th of July, a column of 10,000 to 15,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys fled. The column was hit by Bosnian Serb artillery on the 12th, and those who survived the artillery barrage, several thousand, were captured. These prisoners were systematically executed at a variety of places between the 13th and 17th of July 1995. Some of the captured were distributed for execution outside the Srebrenica area. Approximately 15 captives were given to the Scorpions as their complement of detainees to be killed. Some of these prisoners were delivered to the Scorpions at their base in Turnovo. Slide 129 shows a report of Simatović on the official letterhead of the special units of the Serbian DB, at this stage officially called the Unit for Anti-Terrorist Operations, or JATD. On the 19th of July, Simatović notifies his counterparts in the Republika Srpska Ministry of Internal Affairs that he was ordered to pull back from the zone of combat to, quote, undertake other assignments, close quote. What those assignments were, the report does not say. We do know that this is around the period in which the 6 captives were killed. Slobodan Medić and a group of Scorpions put 6 of the captives in a truck and drove them to an isolated area near Turnovo to kill them. Medić ordered that what they were about to do be videotaped. Slide 130 contains a short excerpt of that video. It does not include the actual executions.
Ajde vamo sedite u stranu. Tamo, da. Sedi tamo, snaga će tamo u taku. Tamo, bravo, sedi tamo, brzo! Ovako, Franja i Pirka vam. Brže! Brže! Opra! Tamo! Kad si Srbe ubio, nisi čekao protivnaka. Tako.
Zekan, idi brzo kać kamion i doteraj.
The Scorpions shouted abuse at the prisoners. Kicked them. Kicked them and taunted the youngest boy that he would die a virgin. The 6 almost certainly knew that they were about to die. They were made to wait while the truck driver went into town to get a newly charged battery for the camcorder. Once the camcorder was ready, 4 of the prisoners were made to stand in a line while the other 2 were forced to lay in the grass. The 4 standing up were then shot, one by one. After the first was shot in the back, the others were made to walk to the spot where the previous victim had just fallen, to stand and wait. As some of the victims twitched in the grass, additional shots were fired into their heads to ensure that they would not survive. The 2 who had been forced to lie in the grass were made to carry the bodies into a nearby house. The Scorpions then shot and killed the 2 remaining men. In this report of the 24th of July, 1995, shown on slide 131, we can tell by this rotation report that the Scorpions returned to their regular duties. Here, the staff commander remarks that the rotation of troops between the Banja Luka Special Police and the Scorpions has gone smoothly. It is the prosecution's case as summarized here on slide 132 that the Scorpions were one of the units of the Serbian DB, and that the accused are criminally responsible for killing of the 3 men and 3 boys in Turnovo. In this case, these members of the units of the DB under the command of a senior DB officer, Vasomijović, were made available to Karadzic, Mladic, and other core members of the joint criminal enterprise to perpetrate crimes in furtherance of their common criminal purpose. Around the same time period, Arkan was in the municipality of Sanski Most. He was there primarily to frighten deserters from the Bosnian Serb army into holding the front lines against the Croatian forces, who were by now retaking some of the territory lost to the Serbs in 1992. We can see from this report in slide 134 that Mr. Stanišić is in direct contact with Arkan on these matters. While in the municipality of Sanski Most, a place that after 1992 had a few Muslims left, Arkan engaged once again in his characteristically brutal crimes. His presence there was part of a larger Serbian DB operation that encompassed not only Sanski Most, but Mrkonić Grad, Kluč, and Prijedor. This coordinated mission involved the special units of the Serbian DB, commanded by Rajo Božović. Arkan's Tigers were under his command. In mid-1995, advances by the army of Bosnia-Herzegovina threatened to retake Sanski Most from the Serbs. To prevent this, Arkan's Tigers were sent to Sanski Most. On the 19th of September, Arkan's men arrived in large numbers and rounded up any remaining Muslims they could find. They were imprisoned in the Hotel Sanis in appalling conditions. 30 of them kept in the hotel's small boiler room, a room from which they were occasionally removed in order to be beaten. 2 detainees died from this brutality. On September 20th, 1995, Arkan's Tigers took at least 12 men from the Hotel Sanis to a house in the nearby village. There, the men were shot 2 at a time in the back of the head. The last 2 victims had their throats slashed when Arkan's men ran out of bullets. On the 21st of September, Arkan's Tigers took another group of approximately 65 Muslims, where they were executed in a similar manner. Several days later, several hundred Muslim detainees were placed on a bus and expelled from Sanski Most. 1 month later, on the 23rd of October, 1995, following the events in Sanski Most, Radovan Karadzic would publicly give an award to Arkan. He was now leaving Bosnia, his work now complete. It is ironic that his presence in Bosnia would end in front of the very town hall in Bijeljina where it had begun. I would turn your attention to slide number 135 while I play this video.
gardu.
For the Guard, and for you as Commander of the Guard, thank you very much, Mr. President, with a lot of gratitude for your presence here. It's not the end. Thank you very much. Would you like to address the Guard?
It is the prosecution's case that the accused are criminally responsible for the crimes committed in Sanski Most because Arkan was a co-member in the joint criminal enterprise and a member of the Serbian DB units. The accused provided Arkan with some of the support and military supplies he needed to perpetrate these crimes. It is also the prosecution's theory that they are responsible, having made members of the special units of the Serbian DB available to other members of the joint criminal enterprise, in this case Radovan Karadzic, who directed them to perpetrate crimes in furtherance of the common criminal purpose. After NATO finally struck some Bosnian Serb positions, Milošević's troops took UN peacekeepers hostage in June 1995 and placed them as human shields on potential targets. Milošević, immediately recognizing the jeopardy this placed Serbia in before the international community, sent Stanišić to intervene, to go with Simatović and with the full authority of Milošević to return with the hostages unharmed. The prosecution does not deny Mr. Stanišić or Mr. Simatović any of the honor or respect they have earned and deserve in this display of courage, freeing the hostage and perhaps even saving their lives. Should the court find them guilty of crimes after this trial, the prosecution will join the defense in submitting that their deeds during the hostage crisis merits consideration by the chamber in assessing an appropriate sentence. It is the prosecution's case, however, and there can be no mistake regarding this. The authority Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović commanded that day, the day they decided to use their authority and their ability to save lives, is tragically the very same authority and the very same ability that they had used more often over the prior 4 years to take lives, to persecute innocents, to drive people from their homes. The reason Mr. Milošević sent them there during the hostage crisis, one of the most tense and volatile events during the war, when all the eyes of the world were fixed on what might happen to these UN peacekeepers, the reason he sent them there was because they, like no one else, had the capacity to walk in among this madness and come out with the hostages unharmed. I would like now to turn to the indictment itself and offer a brief explanation of the charges and the prosecution's theory of the case. The indictment charges both accused with crimes against humanity in violation of Article 5 of the Tribunal Statute and violations of the laws and customs of war in violation of Article 3 of the statute. Slide 137 is a summary of the indictment against Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović. The crimes against humanity are enumerated in counts 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the indictment, and are respectively count 1, the crime of persecution in violation of Article 5H, count 2, murder in violation of Article 5A, count 4, deportation in violation of 5D, and finally, forcible transfer, one of the inhumane acts prohibited under Article 5I of the statute. The crime of murder is also charged as a violation of the laws and customs of war, and is charged in count 3, which charges murder as recognized by Common Article 3(1)A of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and punishable under Article 3 of the Tribunal Statute. It's the prosecution's case that the accused are individually criminally responsible for these crimes pursuant to Article 7(1) of the Tribunal Statute, in that they participated in these crimes with a requisite intent in the following ways. They committed the crimes as members of and participated in a joint criminal enterprise whose goal and purpose was to perpetrate these crimes. They participated in the planning of these crimes. They ordered some of the crimes in this indictment. They aided and abetted in the planning, preparation, and execution of the crimes charged in this indictment. Further, that with the requisite mens rea, they aided and abetted in the planning, preparation, and execution of the crimes. It is the prosecution's case that both accused were part of and helped form a joint criminal enterprise. A criminal enterprise conceived at the highest levels of the government of the Republic of Serbia, along with core members from the affected regions in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. An enterprise that conceived of and implemented a criminal plan designed to secure exclusively for Serbs land lying in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. To acquire these targeted territories, this criminal enterprise would envisage the large and rapid removal of the non-Serb population by the perpetration of the crimes of murder and persecution. Crimes of this magnitude are always the product of a collective, a large group of people who work together to realize their common criminal purpose. The intent to commit the crimes charged in this indictment can be found in all levels of the organizations that were involved in their commission. This case will focus on the highest echelon of those co-perpetrators, the most senior participants. It is the prosecution's position that at all times relevant to this case, these core members shared the intent to remove non-Serbs from designated parts of Croatia and Bosnia through murder and persecutory acts. The glue that bound them together, that harmonized their individual contributions, that ensured that they worked in unison toward a common goal, was the shared criminal intent. The jurisprudence of joint criminal enterprise has evolved to recognize that such criminal enterprises may come to take several forms, as shown on slide number 140. These different forms reflect the nuances between the different ways in which co-perpetrators can join, conceive of, and implement their criminal plans. While the actus reus of each of these forms is essentially identical, they are distinguished based upon their mental element, or mens rea. The evidence you will hear in this case is consistent with two forms of joint criminal enterprise. JCE1, which is sometimes referred to as the basic form, conceives of criminal responsibility for members of a criminal enterprise engaged in a common criminal agreement to commit a specific crime. While each member may carry out a different role in the commission of the crime, they nonetheless each intend for that specific crime to be committed and contribute to it. This is to be contrasted with JCE3, sometimes referred to as the extended form, in which the crime charged, while not part of the originally intended crime, is nonetheless a natural and foreseeable consequence of the implementation of that criminal purpose. With respect to this case, firstly, most importantly, and the principal legal theory of the prosecution is that Jovica Stanišić and Franko Simatović were members of the core group of co-perpetrators that conceived of the crimes contained in this indictment. At all times relevant to these charges, they had the shared intent to forcibly remove non-Serbs from designated areas in an effort to effect fundamental demographic changes in the population. The intent that they shared was not only to forcibly remove these targeted groups of non-Serbs, but they shared the intent to kill them and to persecute them as a means to realize their goals. How do we know that they shared this intent? There will be much evidence from which the Chamber may conclude that the two accused shared the criminal intent of other core members, such as Martic, Karadzic, Hadzic, Mladic. I will confine myself to a single example now. In Zvornik, fighters belonging to Sešel, Arkan, and a group called the Yellow Wasps, the Vukovic brothers, were all engaged in the commission of serious crimes there. You will hear evidence that the Yellow Wasps were investigated by Mr. Stanišić, by the Serbian state security, and subsequently arrested by the Serbian Ministry of Internal Affairs. They were ultimately prosecuted in a Serbian court for crimes they committed in Bosnia and were sentenced to jail terms. While it was proper to investigate and arrest the Vukovic brothers, the question that is raised is why wasn't similar action taken against Sešel's men or Arkan's men? Not only was action not taken, but you will be presented with evidence that the crimes they committed after Bielina and Zvornik were facilitated and supported by the two accused. Is the prosecution's case that the only reasonable conclusion that can be drawn from this is that Arkan and Sešel were among the core members of the JCE, and that Stanišić and Simatović shared their intent to perpetrate the crimes in Zvornik. The evidence is also consistent with what is commonly referred to as Joint Criminal Enterprise 3. The two accused, as well as the other core members of the Joint Criminal Enterprise, shared the intent to forcibly remove non-Serbs from designated areas. Under this theory, even absent a finding that the accused shared the intent to murder and persecute Muslim and Croats, they would remain liable if they shared the intent to forcibly remove these non-Serbs and they willingly accepted the proximate and foreseeable risk that this forcible removal of people would result in the commission of murders and persecutions. In the context of this case, the accused, having joined with others possessing the shared intent of forcibly transferring people from their homes, bear individual criminal responsibility for the crimes of persecution and murder, which are reasonably foreseeable. The prosecution will establish with compelling evidence that over the course of the duration of the joint criminal enterprise, statements by other participants in the criminal plan and reports in the media of the notorious crimes made it abundantly clear to the two accused that the campaign of ethnic cleansing unleashed by their plan involved the strong probability and in time the certainty that murder and persecution would result from it. And with that full awareness, they willingly proceeded knowingly, assuming the risk that such grave crimes would occur. As I have previously said, the actus reus for JCE 1 and JCE 3 are, except for slight nuance.
Thank you for slowing down.
First, that there be a plurality of persons. Given the large collective nature of these crimes, we can, in practical terms, only identify for you and present evidence regarding those members we believe to be the core members of the joint criminal enterprise. These are the people indicated on the chart we have used several times over the course of this opening. The second actus reus element is the existence of a common purpose, which amounts to or involves the commission of a crime under this statute. It is the prosecution's case that each of the crimes charged in this indictment was a purpose of the joint criminal enterprise. The third actus reus element is that the accused participate in furtherance of the common criminal design in a manner that assists in its achievement, contributes to it, materially helps its execution in a significant way. I will now, in a very summary fashion, using slide 143, to identify the acts of participation which the prosecution allege incur criminal liability for Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović.
Mr. Groom, constantly the interpreters, both French and BCS, are approximately 1 or 2 lines behind. Give them an opportunity to take a breath now and then. That will certainly be appreciated.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
With respect to the Kraina, it is the prosecution's case that their efforts to organize, finance, train, and equip Martić's men and army, thereby enabling them to perpetrate the serious crimes they did against the non-Serb population of the Kraina, was an act of participation in the overall joint criminal enterprise. Similarly, with respect to the SAO, SBWS, it is the prosecution's case that the accused acts of participation in the joint criminal enterprise were in part financing and equipping Arkan and his men who directly perpetrated the crimes. With respect to both the Krajina and the SAO SBWS, Mr. Stanišić and Simatović gave direction to the local political leaders, including Martic, Babic, and Hadžić, to ensure that their political activities also advance the goals of the common criminal purpose. Finally, even if after the conclusion of this case, the Chamber has a reasonable doubt about whether Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović directly funded and equipped Arkan, they would still be responsible for his crimes. The crimes of another co-member in a joint criminal enterprise, if the Chamber was satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that they were in fact part of the same joint criminal enterprise. With respect to the Bosnian municipalities that Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović had a role in their takeover in 1992, is the prosecution's contention that their culpable acts of participation in the JCE included planning the attacks, providing training, arms, equipment, and funding, and in some instances, they also arranged military transport for the direct perpetrators of the crimes. In the event the Chamber finds that the evidence does not permit an inference that they directed immediate perpetrators of these crimes, and in fact that it was Bosnian Serb leaders alone who directed them to commit crimes, the prosecution's case would be that placing these men and this equipment at the disposal of another core member of the JCE to use to advance the criminal purpose of the JCE also incurs liability. With respect to Turnovo, their acts of participation include deploying the Scorpions, which it is the prosecution's case, were part of the special units. Also, if the evidence does not suggest that they personally knew of the killings of the 6 males, it is the prosecution's case that by placing their men at the disposal of other members of the JCE, in this case Mladic and Karadzic, also incurs to them liability for the crimes they committed under the direction of these other core members. With respect to Sanski Most, as you can see on slide 145, the prosecution's case is similar to our case with respect to other crimes perpetrated in Bosnia. Finally, Your Honors, in such a large collective crime, the jurisprudence of the tribunal in the Berjanin appeal judgment recognized that those most responsible for these serious crimes are also those most removed from them. It considers that those high-level members of the enterprise can and do use others to directly perpetrate the crimes they intend, and as such, bear individual criminal responsibility. Under this theory, the core members of the joint criminal enterprise, sharing a common intent to remove non-Serbs, use others to directly advance their criminal goals. Those they used may or may not have also shared their intent But this theory holds that even absent proof of a shared intent with these perpetrators, the accused are criminally responsible because they employ these people as instrumentalities of their criminal plan. To give you an example from this case, I remind you about what we have already said about Bosanski Shamets. When it became necessary, Jovica Stanišić would personally intervene to have one of the primary perpetrators released, a man named Cerny, so that he could return to Shamets and continue his crimes. Did Cerny and Stanišić share the same intent? Probably. But even in absent of finding that they did share the same intent, Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović bear responsibility for the crimes of Cerny if the court finds that Cerny was used as an instrumentality of the joint criminal enterprise to perpetrate its objectives. It's the prosecution's case that Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović are responsible for and participated in the crimes charged in several ways, as set out in the indictment and the pretrial brief. It is not our case that each crime relied on only one mode of participation. Given the size of the special units and the breadth of Stanisić's and Simatović's activities, it is most often the case that in any one criminal event, their involvement in these crimes can be discerned in more than one way. The indictment also alleges that the two accused planned crimes charged. It is the prosecution's position that Stanisić's and Simatović's establishment of 26 training camps, provision of instructors, supply of military weapons and logistical equipment to the direct perpetrators of the crimes is evidence upon which the Chamber could reasonably conclude they engaged in acts of planning as defined by the jurisprudence of this tribunal. The Chamber will recall slide number 42. In the Krajina, someone by the name of Miljović, referring to things going according to, quote, the training plan, unquote. You will also recall the statement of Vojislav Šešelj, in which he identifies Mr. Simatović as the mastermind behind the plan for the takeover of Zvornik. Ordering. According to the jurisprudence of this tribunal, ordering concerns a person in a position of authority using that position to persuade another to commit an offense under the statute. The order can be explicit or implicit and can be proved with circumstantial evidence. It is the prosecution's case that the evidence will support a conclusion by the Chamber that Jovica Stanišić and Franko Simatović sent Arkan to the several municipalities in the indictment where he committed crimes. And even if they did not explicitly tell him to commit the crimes of murder and persecution, in the context of their knowledge that everywhere he went, he committed these crimes, the only conclusion that can be drawn is that they're directing him to a particular location with a non-Serb population was an implied order to perpetrate the crimes of murder and persecution there. I will not spend any time discussing aiding and abetting at this stage. all of the acts the prosecution attributes to Stanišić and Simatović could be the basis of participation as an aider and abettor. Your Honors, in the indictment, the prosecution alleges that the accused committed these crimes by their acts and omissions. I would like to take just a few minutes to expound on what is meant by that phrase. The word omission actually has two distinct meanings according to the jurisprudence of the tribunal. One use of omission is as a form of criminal liability. The other use is a description of a factual situation from which inferences can be drawn. Omission as a legal form of criminal liability imagines a situation in which an accused has a legal duty toward the victim. For example, a legal duty to protect. It is not the prosecution's case that Mr. Stanišić or Simatović had an affirmative legal duty to ensure the welfare of the victims of crimes in Croatia and Bosnia. Omission as it applies to a factual determination from which inferences can be drawn is how the prosecution uses the word omission in this case. For example, if over the course of this case, the chamber takes a view of the evidence that despite receiving information about the crimes which were being committed as a result of their contribution to the joint criminal enterprise, and that in the face of that knowledge, they failed to take any corrective measures, such as instructing the members of the special units to refrain from criminal conduct, then the court is entitled to draw the reasonable inference that such omission constituted encouragement, material support to the direct perpetrators of the crimes, because they were emboldened by the failure of Stanišić and Simatović to take any corrective action. You have seen a video of Arkan on the veranda of his shop in the middle of Belgrade state publicly that he kills his prisoners. You will hear other evidence that he and his men were a regular sight in Belgrade. They moved openly, dressed in uniform, carrying military weapons, often in cars, with tigers painted on the hood. His ability to travel freely around Belgrade under the nose of Stanišić, whose legal responsibility, if you recall, included the control of extremist groups. Arkan's confidence in his own impunity, a result of Mr. Stanisić's failure to ever take action against him, materially advanced the crimes Arkan committed, in addition to the accused positive acts of directing and supporting Arkan's crimes. Your Honors, this brings to a conclusion the prosecution's summary of its evidence and overview of why it alleges that Jovica Stanišić and Franko Simatović are criminally responsible for the crimes charged in the indictment. I thank you for your time and attention. And as we prepare to call our first witness later this month, I give the Chamber, as well as Mr. Stanišić and Mr. Simatović, my assurance and the assurance of Mr. Brammertz that the prosecution will conduct its case according to the highest standards of fairness and justice, enabling this chamber to reach a fair and just adjudication of the charges against the accused. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Mr. Groom. There apparently was one contested issue. Mr. Jovanovic, I think it would be wise that one way or another that you agree with the prosecution on what is still part of the indictment or not, and if it would assist you, let me just have a look whether I still have it somewhere. In the decision, I think it was a decision of April 2007, wherein the 10 incidents were struck and not to be led any evidence there. Of course, it clearly says that we still have counts 1, 4, and 5, which are broader. So therefore, and of course we find, especially under 4 and 5, we have Bielina mentioned. So to say nothing in Bielina is part of the indictment anymore, if that is your view, then I think we rather settle or come to conclusions in the beginning of the trial rather than at the end. I don't know whether you want to further discuss it with Mr. Groom and Ms. Breyemeyer, or at this moment the indictment is as it is. Just I encourage and urge the parties to come at least to an understanding which is not so much apart from it. So I encourage you to understand it. And if any matter there remains, then perhaps it might be wise to address the chamber in the early stages of the proceedings. Is there, I was just wondering where exactly that was. No. It's not on my screen anymore, but it's the second part of the decision. I don't know whether it was April or not, but the decision in which it's explained what it means that the 10 incidents are taken out, whereas 18 remain, and their specific reference to the broader charges is made in that decision. This just as guidance for you. It will be quite a while before we resume. Is there any procedural matter that we need to address at this moment before we adjourn until the 29th of June?
Your Honor, this was a matter I raised in an email to your staff earlier today, but it would be helpful for the chamber to have some idea about how the chamber will calculate the amount of time allotted for cross-examination in the scheduling of witnesses. So if a witness were to take, let's say, an hour examination in chief, if you could give us some idea about what the cross-examination time would be, it'd be helpful to schedule the next witness.
Yes, at the same time, much depends in that respect on whether it's a 92bis witness, whether it's a 92ter statement, or whether it's a viva voce witness, because that makes quite a difference. But we'll pay attention to it and we'll try to give you the guidance you're asking for. It sometimes also depends on the subject matter of the testimony. If it's highly contested, then of course there might be a request for more time for cross-examination, whereas if it is crime-based and only contested at a certain level, it might be different. But we'll try to assist you as good as we can. And any other matter?
Yes, Your Honour had requested me to find out
about the
Deutschmarks
yes.
of the number that was mentioned on one of the slides, slide 61, and I'm happy to say that after quite a bit of calculating, I have come up with two numbers that I can give to Your Honours. Apparently at that point in time, in late 1991, there were an official currency rate and a kind of semi-official currency rate. Yes. The official one was 1 Deutschmark amounting to 13 dinars, which would calculate the number given on the slide to approximately 93 million Deutschmarks. And the semi-official currency rate was 33.5 dinars, which would make approximately 36 million Deutschmarks. And all of that related to old Yugoslav dinars and not the new ones that were later established.
So anything around 50 million Deutschmarks, that's... thank you for that information. Any matter? Mr. Jordash.
I rise really to deal with the issue of Rule 84. I don't know if Your Honours would wish us to indicate for the record that we elect not to make an opening statement at this stage.
Yes, that was my understanding from informal communication with the parties. It appeared that neither defence would like to make an opening statement, which means that you still have an opportunity to make an opening statement after the prosecution's case has been closed and if there's any need to hear a defence case.
Certainly, and may I also, for the record, indicate that the accused elects not to make an 84 bis statement for the same reasons that he elects not to go to the video conferencing room. I thought, for the, out of abundance of caution, I should put that on the record.
I would say it goes almost without saying, because if we have no possibility to hear him, then of course he never could address the chamber, and that is the situation at this moment. If there's no other matter. Mr. Jovanovic, the chamber understood that you also would not use the right to make an opening statement at this moment.
Yes, Your Honours. In the informal communication, while we were still discussing the schedule, the defense has informed both the OTP and the chamber that at this point in time, the accused will not be giving a statement, and there will be no opening statement either, for different reasons than those given by the defense of Mr. Stanišić. That is our position at this point.
For you, the same applies, that you can make an opening statement at a later stage. Then still to be seen whether it would be at the same time for both defense cases, or one at the beginning of the presentation of one defense case and the other at the beginning of the other. That's still to be seen. But at this moment, there is no opening statement, nor is there an unsworn statement under Rule 84 bis. Which means that we adjourn and will resume on Monday, the 29th of June at 2:15 in this same courtroom 1.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.